Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this National Haitian American Community Town Hall. Whether you are tuning in from Florida, Massachusetts, New York, Georgia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Washington, D.C., or anywhere across the country, we are grateful that you are here with us tonight. My name is Santra Denis, and I'm honored to be here in studio alongside Vanessa Joseph for this important national conversation tonight. Tonight, we come together as Haitian Americans, as allies, as advocates, as elected officials, as professionals, as parents, as young people, as faith leaders, as organizers, and as leaders who care deeply about the future of our people.
Thank you, Santra. Bonsoir, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here with you tonight. On behalf of the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network, the Haitian American Professionals Coalition, or HAPC, and Avanse Ansanm, we want to welcome you to this town hall and thank you for making time to be part of this conversation. We've curated an evening that goes beyond information, but focuses on connection, clarity, and most importantly, pouvoir. And it's about making sure that Haitian American communities across the country aren't isolated, they're not misinformed, and they're not left out of the decisions that directly impact our families.
Because we are virtual tonight, we know people are joining us from different cities, different states, and different time zones. But even though we are not all in the same physical room, we are very much gathered in the same spirit. We invite you to stay engaged throughout the entire program, listen closely, share this conversation with family and friends, and use the form on the landing page to submit questions. We especially encourage you to think about the people in your own circle who need this information.
And we also want to name that tonight's conversation may touch on issues that feel personal or stressful or even overwhelming. Immigration status, TPS, the rising cost of gas, groceries, healthcare, housing, public education, voting rights. None of these are abstract policy topics. These are kitchen table issues. These are family issues. These are survival issues. These are future of our children issues. So tonight, our goal is not to create fear, but instead, our goal is to provide clarity, share trusted information, and identify concrete steps that we can take together.
We are meeting at a critical moment. Across the country, Haitian families are facing pressure from multiple directions. Many are worried about the future of TPS and other humanitarian protections. Families are trying to keep up with the rising cost of rent, groceries, gas, insurance, childcare, and healthcare. Parents are concerned about what's happening in our public schools and whether their children will continue to have access to quality, inclusive, and well-funded education. At the same time, communities like ours are being asked to navigate misinformation, political attacks, and systems that too often fail to speak to our language, understand our culture, or respect our contributions.
And yet, even in this moment, our community continues to show up. Haitian Americans are healthcare workers, educators, small business owners, public servants, union members, students, caregivers, veterans, faith leaders, elected officials, and organizers. We're contributing every single day to the economic, cultural, civic, and social fabric of this country. But contribution alone isn't enough. Visibility alone is not enough. We also need power. We need organization. We need representation. We need trusted information. And we need to move together with purpose. That's why this town hall matters.
One of the reasons this gathering is so important is because challenges faces Haitian communities are not limited to one city or one state. What happens to Haitian families in Florida affects families in Massachusetts. What happens in New York affects families in Georgia. What happens in Washington, D.C. affects our communities everywhere. Our issues are connected and our response must be connected too.
Exactly. For far too long, Haitian communities have often been forced to respond to crises, city by city, organization by organization, and family by family. But this moment right now requires a national response. We need our elected officials talking to advocates. We need our professionals talking to community organizations. We need our young people talking to our elders. We need our faith leaders, educators, business owners, attorneys, healthcare workers, and civic leaders all working together. No single organization can carry this work alone. No single elected official can solve these issues alone. No single community can protect itself alone. But together, we can build the kind of national infrastructure our community deserves.
So tonight, we also want to get something straight. Civic engagement is not something we only talk about during election season. Civic engagement is how we protect our families. It is how we defend public education. It is how we fight for immigration relief. It's how we push back against policies that make life harder for working families. It is how we make sure our communities are seen, heard, and respected. And civic engagement does not only mean voting. Although voting is critical for those who are eligible, it also means showing up for school board meetings, calling members of Congress, joining advocacy campaigns, supporting trusted organizations, educating our neighbors, and making sure misinformation does not spread unchecked in our communities.
And that's especially important for mixed status families and immigrant communities. Some members of our community may not be eligible to vote, but they still have a voice. They still have power. They still have stories that matter. They can still organize, advocate, educate, and mobilize. And for those who are eligible to vote, we have a responsibility to understand what is at stake. Local elections matter, state elections matter, federal elections matter, school board elections matter, city halls matter, county commission chambers matter, Congress matters, and every issue that we're discussing tonight is shaped by decisions made in public offices. So our community can't afford to sit on the sidelines.
Tonight's program is designed to help us move from concern to action. We will begin with a broader reflection on the state of the Haitian American community and why this moment demands our attention. We will discuss immigration, including Haiti TPS, what has been accomplished through advocacy, and what still needs to happen. We'll also talk about the cost of living and affordability crisis, including housing, groceries, gas, healthcare, public benefits, and the everyday pressures facing working families.
We'll also discuss public education and the future of public education because our children's opportunities, our schools, and our community's long-term future are all deeply connected. And we'll close by focusing on civic engagement and concrete calls to action because the goal tonight is not just for people to leave informed, but we want people to leave activated, and we want everyone watching to know that there is a role for you in this work.
As we move through tonight's discussion, we ask everyone to stay grounded in respect, unity, and purpose. We may come from different cities, different political experiences, different professional backgrounds, and different generations, but we are united by a shared commitment to the dignity, safety, and future of Haitian people.
And we also want to lead with hope, disciplined hope. And we have to understand that from telling the truth and from refusing to let our community be defined only by crisis, Haiti and the Haitian diaspora have always carried a legacy of courage, resistance, faith, intellect, creativity, and determination. And that legacy continues on in us. So tonight is part of that legacy.
With that, we are ready to begin. Vanessa, you have been helping to lead this work nationally and locally, and you have been very clear that this is a defining moment for Haitian Americans across the country. So to help ground tonight's conversation, I want to turn it over to you to speak about the state of Haitian American community. What are we facing and what this moment requires from all of us?
Thank you, Santra, and thank you again to everyone joining us here tonight. Let's begin by grounding ourselves in where we are as a community in terms of the power that we already have and the responsibility that we now carry. Because sometimes when people talk about the Haitian community, they only talk about us in moments of crisis. They talk about us when Haiti is in the news. They talk about us when there's political instability or violence or immigration debate or maybe even a natural disaster. But that's not the full story of who we are. The Haitian American community is not a crisis community. We're a community of builders. We're a community of workers, parents, students, caregivers, entrepreneurs, educators, public servants, and leaders. We're a community that has carried history, sacrifice, faith, language, culture, and responsibility across generations. And tonight, when we talk about the state of the Haitian American community, I want us to hold two truths at the same time. The first truth is that our community is being tested. We're being tested economically, we're being tested politically, we're being tested socially. Families are trying to figure out how to keep up with rising costs while still taking care of children, elders, and loved ones here and back home. We're being tested by immigration uncertainty, by the fear that protections people depend on today could be weakened or taken away tomorrow. We're being tested by an affordability crisis that's making even basic stability feel out of reach for too many working families. And we're being tested by what is happening to public education. Because for immigrant families, public education was never just about school. It's been about opportunity. It's been about mobility. It's been about the promise that the next generation could go so much further than the last. But the second truth is just as important. We're not powerless. We're not invisible, and we're not starting from zero. There are more than 1.2 million people in the Haitian diaspora right here in the United States. That means we're not a small footnote. We're not a side conversation. We are a national community with national reach, national influence, and national responsibility. And when you look at where Haitian Americans live, Florida, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Maryland, Indiana, DC, and beyond, you see something very clearly. Our issues are national because our people are national. And what happens to a Haitian family in Miami is what will be connected to what happens in Boston. What happens in Brooklyn is connected to what happens in Atlanta. What happens in Washington, D.C. is connected to what happens in every Haitian household trying to make sense of policy decisions that affect their future. That's why this moment matters, because we can't afford to be scattered in a moment that requires coordination. We can't afford to be quiet in a moment that requires voice. And we can't afford to only react after decisions have already been made. That is part of why the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network exists. NHAEON was created because representation matters, but organized representation matters even more. Today, NHAEON represents a growing network of more than 150 current and former Haitian American elected and appointed officials across the country. And that number matters because not that it's a symbol, but it really reflects something our community has built over time. It reflects city clerks, council members, commissioners, school board members, judges, legislators, mayors, and public servants who understand that when our community is under pressure, we need people inside the rooms where decisions are being made. But let's get something straight. NHAEON's role is not only to celebrate Haitian American leadership. Our role is to help organize it. Our role is to connect elected officials with advocates, professionals, faith leaders, educators, students, and families. Our role is to help make sure that when our community is facing attacks, confusion, or neglect, that we're able to respond with clarity and with strategy. Our role is to say Haitian Americans are not just impacted by policy. Haitian Americans must help shape policy. And that's a different posture. That's not begging to be seen. That is standing in the power that we already have. Because when we talk about TPS, we're talking about workers, families, homeowners, tenants, students, church members, and neighbors who have built lives here. And when we talk about affordability, we're talking about families who are doing everything right and still being stretched too thin. When we talk about education, we're talking about children whose futures should not be limited by underfunded schools, language barriers, political attacks, or zip codes. And when we talk about civic engagement, we're talking about whether our community will be organized enough to protect itself and powerful enough to demand more. This is the moment that we're in. A moment where fear is real, but fear cannot be our strategy. A moment where misinformation is spreading, but misinformation can't be louder than trusted leadership. It's a moment where families are tired, but our exhaustion can't turn into silence. We've inherited too much for that. We come from people who made and did so much more with way less. People who crossed water, crossed borders, learned new systems, worked jobs they were overqualified for, raised children in languages they were still learning, sent money home when they barely had enough, and still found a way to build community wherever they landed. That history lives in us. But history alone will not protect us. Pride alone will not protect us. Representation alone will not protect us. We need organization. We need advocacy, and we need a disciplined hope. And by disciplined hope, I mean the kind of hope that doesn't just say things will get better. I mean the kind of hope that asks, what are we going to build? Who are we going to call? What meeting are we going to attend? What young person are we going to mentor? What family are we going to connect to resources? What misinformation are we going to correct? What policy are we going to fight for? This is the kind of hope that this moment requires. I said before that our community is being tested, but that's not all that's happening. Our community is also being revealed. This moment is revealing our strength. It's revealing our leadership. It's revealing our need for unity. And it's revealing that we have more power than we sometimes allow ourselves to believe. So tonight, as we move through these conversations, I want us to listen not as spectators, but as people with a role to play. This is not a moment for isolation. It's not a moment for confusion. It's not a moment for silence. This is a moment for Haitian Americans to move with a clear vision, with courage, and with collective power. We all know the saying, "Main pile, chai palu." Many hands make the load lighter. That is not just a proverb. That is a strategy. And tonight, that is our charge, to carry this moment together, to protect our families together, to build power together, and to make sure that our children inherit more than struggle, that they inherit infrastructure, representation, opportunity, and pride. I'll say it again. Our community is being tested economically, politically, and socially, but we're not waiting to be rescued. We are organizing to be recognized. We are organizing to be protected. We are organizing to lead. And if we stay connected, disciplined, and courageous, we'll not only survive this moment, we'll shape what comes next. Admit that, Ansanm.
Joined by the Johnny Sellison. Johnny is the Senior Vice President of the New York City Economic Development Corporation, but he's more than that. He is our friend. He's a tireless champion for social justice and transformative change. Johnny, we're grateful to have you and returning it over to you to take it away. Turning it over to you, Johnny. Turning it over to you, Johnny. If you can unmute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Santra. And thank you, Vanessa. You're both two great people that I really enjoy uh, collaborating with. And I am extremely honored to be here with you. And so we're going to have an amazing conversation. And I invite all of you who are watching, whether you're watching live or whether you will be watching this a little bit later, to really sort of engage in this. And there'll be follow up for you to be part of this ongoing conversation. As Santra mentioned, I am Johnny Celestin, and we have four amazing women on this panel today to talk to us about some real important issues that our community is facing. And each of them will have about 7 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes, to have that conversation or to initiate that conversation with us. And for each of those topics, really we'll focus on a few things. We'll want to know from them really, for them to help us understand and set the scene for us, um, and how the people in our community are experiencing those specific issues. And we'll want them to really walk us through what's been done and especially what can be done in this particular topic. And so the first person I'm going to introduce, there'll be, as I mentioned, there are four women. One is Tessa Petit. She is the executive director of Florida Immigration Coalition, FLIC. We have with us Assembly Member Farah Souffran Forrest. She is in my state of New York, an assembly member for District 57 out in Brooklyn. She'll be talking with us about cost of living and affordability crisis. We have Representative Jeannie Joseph out of Colorado State Assembly, in District 10. She is the Majority Caucus co-chair there. And Representative Joseph will be talking with us about education and the future of public education. And last but not least, we will have Joanne Antoine, who is the executive director of Common Cause out in Maryland. And Joanne will be talking with us about voting rights and civic engagement. And so we'll just get the conversation started. Um, Brief bio of Tessa. She's the executive director of Florida Immigrant Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of 83 organizational members. She has been instrumental in immigration advocacy, especially more recently around the discharge petition for Haiti TPS. Tessa, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you. So please, Tessa, set the scene for us. A lot of families who are listening to us here in their living room or on their phones, wherever they are, many of them are living with anxiety about their status. So can you talk to us plainly about where does TPS stand right now? What are the biggest threat families face, and what do we need to understand about this issue?
Thank you, Johnny. Before I start, I want to say thank you to Vanessa and to Santra for putting this together. Way overdue in our community, and excited to be here and honored to be here. So we'll start with a broader view of what is happening in the world of immigration right now in the United States. Since the beginning of 2025, we saw very intentional attacks on all level of immigrants, regardless of their status. And it even started with birthright citizenship, right? So the idea is to stop migration and to stop foreigners from being in the United States and for being US citizens and having some form of control, owning the control that citizenship provides. There is also a lot of intentional attacks on immigrant communities to remove their legal status and to force them into deportation. So what has happened besides the birthright citizenship, we've seen the termination of temporary status for parolees. We've seen an attempt to terminate the ability for refugees to change status from refugee to permanent residence and from permanent residence to U.S. citizenship. We've seen the cancellation of TPS for different countries. We've also seen a request to start denaturalizing U.S. citizens and increasing a team, an established team with a quota, I believe, of about 200 people per month to be denaturalized. Now, all of that shows what the threats are, not just to TPS recipients, but to everyone who is here for different reasons, right? Whether it was just looking for a better life, economic reasons, or people who are here because they fear going back to their country, like it is our case for us Haitians. And now to go back to get into the subject of our own folks, our 350,000 folks who are Haitians on TPS. And when we talk about the threat to those families, we know for our families, it's not just about those who are here in the country on TPS. We're also talking about the 50 to 60,000 US born children that they have that could end up being deported with them. And we are also talk, and when we talk about a humanitarian crisis, we talk not only about these 300,000 plus people who would end up going back to Haiti, but we're also talking about the hundreds of thousands and millions of Haitians who depend on the support of those who are here, who have TPS and who are working and taking care of our family members back home. Earlier, you've heard both Santra and Vanessa, and particularly Vanessa, talk about how there is a call for us to stand up and be civically active. There is also a need for us to understand that none of the things that should or could happen to protect our communities can happen on their own. And none of them also can just happen by the work of a handful of organizations. Before I go into what happened recently with Haiti TPS, I want to give Haitians a little bit of history about what Haitians have done, right? Back in the 1980s, when Haitians were fighting for status, they were fighting for what has become the Cuban Haitian Refugee Program, and then they were also fighting for the work authorizations while they were applying for asylum or refugee after the departure of Baby Doc in the 80s. Well, back then, it is Haitians, undocumented Haitians here in Florida and across the United States that organized and mobilized day after day after day while litigation was happening, right? They mobilized every day for over a year, which not only got status for Haitians, but also created what we now call work permit that everybody from every country has. That was done through the work of Haitians. And so I want to bring us back to the current moment. There is a litigation when the Department of Homeland Security decided to terminate TPS for Haitians. There are litigators that came together and decided they were going to fight and push back on this. And they are pro bono lawyers, and they are doing this from the goodness of their heart, right? But they need the support of the community. They need the community to stand behind them and give them the courage that they need to keep moving and the encouragement also that they need to keep moving. Yo bezwen jan nou diya, yo bezwen jen vren, e se nou pou bayol. When we realized that the Haiti TPS was also very at risk, we attempted something that had never been done before in the history of the United States Congress. In the last 40 years, there has been 600 discharge petitions that were filed in Congress. Only 14 had made it to the finish line. Well, the Haiti TPS was the 15th one, and it was the first discharge petition that was done for immigration as a subject, right? And it led to a bill on the floor of Congress that was voted with a completely bipartisan bill with Democrats and immigrants and Republicans that voted for Haitians to keep their TPS status. All of this happened because tens of groups across the country did their work, spoke to their legislators, spoke to their members of Congress, made phone calls. Volunteers made hundreds and thousands of phone calls to members of Congress. But now we're at the point where this is going to go to the Senate. The reality is the Senate is not as easy as the House. It is much more difficult, right? And we need 12 Republican senators to get it to where it needs to be, that it's not vetoed by the executive, by the President Trump. So all this to say, the community needs to stand up. The Haitian proved the power of their voice when it was moved to the House, because we had a heartfelt argument, but not just because of what is happening in Haiti, but it's because everyone had to recognize the contribution of Haitians in this country in this current moment. But it cannot just be other voices that are reminding people of our contributions and who we are. It is us who need to remind people of who we are. We need to believe in who we are, and we need to stand up together for our brothers and sisters. People on TPS may be afraid to stand up, maybe afraid to make phone calls, maybe afraid to send letters to their members of Congress. But we should not. Those of you who have the courage should not be afraid, and should do the work, and should mobilize, and should advocate for your community members. And you're going to hear from the people after me talking about the different subjects, the different issues that we're all facing. And all of these require that as community members, we show up, we stand up, we speak up. We
Tessa,
want people.
nope,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry.
I was just going to ask that we want people to understand that the fight is not over. People, Haitians on TPS currently have their status until July 1st. They can't get their work permit. They can't get their driver's license. But July 1st it's right around the corner. So really, people need to come together, focus, and move to the next step with advocates that are doing the work.
Thank you. Tessa, we have one more minute on the timer. And one question I had for you was we know that there's a lot of misinformation being spread in our community and through WhatsApp and different social media. People are hearing things and are making decisions based on things. What should Haitian family be doing right now to think about this as they think about this issue, to protect themselves? And how do they find the resources? Is there a number that they should call? Who do they talk to make sure they have the right information?
For folks to know what they need to do, what they can do, we encourage folks to seek legal assistance. There are so many programs that provide free legal assistance to our Haitian communities, starting with Flick. Flick collaborates with groups like Catholic Charities Legal Services, with the Haitian American Lawyers Association, with the Americans for Immigrant Justice. And that is just in Florida. We have a number. We have our Flick hotline, 1-888-600 5762. And we also offer free legal advice with an immigration lawyer for about 20 to 30 minutes, multiple times a week. They can visit flick.org. That is FLIC.org. And there they will find our schedules. They can sign up, and wherever they are in the United States, they can jump on the Zoom. They will find a lawyer to talk to in English, Creole, French, Spanish, whichever the language is that they feel comfortable in, and they will have a conversation and an interview with an immigration lawyer. That is
Thank
the
you.
best thing they can do, talk to an immigration lawyer.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful information and things that I think our community needed to know and understand what's happened, what's happening, and what we can do to protect ourselves. I want to introduce the next speaker on the issue of cost of living and affordability crisis. This will be Assembly Member Souffrant Forest out of New York. Assembly Member Souffrant Forest represent New York Assembly District 57 in Brooklyn. She's the daughter of Haitian immigrants. She was first elected in 2020 and has been instrumental in championing the rights of tenants, as well as expanding access to health care and reform to the carceral system. She believes that working family or working class folks in New York deserve stable housing, affordable health care, and the resources to pursue a good life. Assemblymember, thank you for being here, and I'll pass it over to you to give us again a frame of particularly the issue of the affordability crisis. Um, of course, inflation has hit like 3.8%. Maybe people are not thinking about this issue in terms of percentages, but gas is over 4.25 if you are in Florida. In New York, I've seen some things almost $5 a gallon. So Haitians, whether in New York, in Brooklyn, in Miami, in Chicago, wherever they are, they're living this cost of living crisis is hitting them for real in real time. Can you paint a picture for us of what working class households are actually navigating right now between rent, groceries, healthcare, and just getting to work? What does this mean for folks in reality as you see it in the district?
Right. So for my district is in central Brooklyn, and New York City, in the context of the national frame, like when you look at New York versus the United States, when you look at New York is very rich. We are a huge donor state to a lot of other states, like our income taxes, our corporate taxes, what we raise actually is a big contributor to basically Wisconsin and other places. And so when we say like we are feeling the crunch of not only gas, astronomical housing prices, both for the homeowner and the renter. And it's not just that. These cuts that are coming from the federal government severely impacts the services that we are able to render to constituents, to people across New York State. For example, New York City is a safe harbor city. We are a right to shelter city. And so whoever comes to, New York City, if you are unhoused, our New York City, like Constitution says, you have to house them. And so these are the different the parameters that we're speaking about. As a person who is not only the chair of the task force on new Americans, so I oversee a lot of immigrant issues and conversations across the state, but also being on these different committees like aging, social services, health. I know for a fact, like New York City, New York State does a lot to provide a structural support for its people. And so now when you face not only gas prices on the personal level, but federal cuts to Medicaid or healthcare that will drop off 450,000 people come July 1st. They got their notice saying that they will no longer be the recipients of healthcare. It behooves us as legislators to move to not only look at revenue streams, but also to look at what that means for the person on the ground. And so right now, my state budget is delayed. We are over 40 days late. And the reason why we're 40 days late with what we're supposed to deliver since April 1st is because we are talking about these affordability crisis, this idea of cost of living, whether it be insurance, healthcare, making sure that families are not broken apart when it comes down to immigration. It's like the big bucket is we have to make sure people are protected and stay safe. But what does that mean in the tiny ways? And so I know, Johnny, you work on the New York City economic development as vice president. And so you understand a bit more about how policies shape New York City residents. But at the state level, we are the front line when it comes down to these astronomical Trump cuts. We are the front lines to making sure our communities are staying protected. And so whether it means we're making sure that New York City gets $4 billion to make sure the libraries stay open, the lawyers can still provide legal services, and children can still go to school, we're doing that, but then we're also doing things like making sure that, we're providing for climate, we're providing for schools and across New York State. So, I mean, I can go into details, but, Johnny, I want to
Yeah.
answer your questions.
Yes, no, but thank you. I mean, I think, on this particular point, I was sort of thinking about the numbers, between since 2020, for example, grocery prices went up by like 30%, right? And so, this continues to grow. And for a working family, who may not necessarily be thinking about trade policies, I mean, we at New York City Economic Development Corporation are thinking about how do we attract businesses to New York because we understand that we need to create jobs, not just jobs. We need to create good paying jobs. And the focus of the new mayor now is economic justice. And that really means not only are we creating more jobs, but people need to be able to live in this city, which is so expensive. And so when you think about a working class family, what this means is that a grocery strip trip that might have been like, $200, right, all of a sudden turns into $240, $260, right? What it means is that if you're putting gas in your car, maybe you were spending $60 a week to get back and forth. You're now paying 100, 110. In real life, right? In real life, and for those of us who are who support friends and families back home, the average remittance what they send to Haiti is $150. So all of a sudden, you have a family that's now hit with grocery where they're spending $100 more a week, gas they're spending $40 to $60 more a week. We can begin to see how, there's sort of like this begins to impact not just us here in the city or in the state or in this country, but globally, right? Our families back home. And so, one question I had for you as we have a bit more time is around the work that, obviously on the assembly, for us in New York City in particular, we're very focused on balancing the budget, but obviously with the support of the assembly, what have been some of the policies, or one, maybe if you can highlight one, whether it is in healthcare or housing, that you've been focusing on, and that might sort of trigger it for the folks that are listening to us, that's been sort of like moving the needle forward, and the particular committees that you're working on. I know you're in aging, you're in housing, so just so maybe an example of one of those would be really helpful for our the folks watching us.
Right. So we did a lot on particularly trying to fill in the gaps, right? So when it comes down to revenue, I mean, these things, it's not adoken, I pay do la vet for like gas, like it's real. And so when we look at that, we're like, okay, so what can we do to make sure that um people are still able to afford things? So we can't affect the price of gas, but we can affect the price of health of childcare. So we in this in we well in the state, we got a lot of money, bullied it out of our governor, to give to the city to make sure that they can then provide vouchers or seats or increased availability for 3K seats, right? I have a 5-year-old. I'm about to have another baby again. Listen, at the end of the day, $2,400 is the cost per month that my constituents are paying for childcare. This is why it took me 5 years to have the next one, because we have to save up for that one, right? That the one that's coming. But that's one way we can alleviate it. Another way that we can alleviate it in the assembly is by passing common sense bills. So for example, in 2013, when we talk about drug shortages, I'm a nurse by trade. Drug shortages, we were unable to get drugs into people's hands. We had 256-ish drugs on that list. In 2011, we brought it down with the FDA to 11. Now in 2026, that list is up to 70. And we know why, because of tariffs, because of what is happening abroad. But in New York City, in New York State, we can do something about it, even though the orange man in office is doing his thing. We can make sure that we mandate that insurances cover generic drugs when there are shortages. So that was a bill I passed last year. I mean, last 2 weeks ago or something like that. But at the end of the day, there are things that we can do to alleviate the pressure off of people. We also passed we're about to pass a very comprehensive immigration bill, a part of our budget, that says, look, what happened in Minneapolis cannot happen in New York State, where local law enforcement is colluding with ICE agents. ICE is bringing in the money to small towns, but no, 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 no. You do not need money from ICE and the federal government to patrol your own border, your own town. Look, we are limiting these contracts. We're making sure that hospitals and schools are safe for people to go and receive services and the education that they need. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we did with immigration, Denis, not detention. So we got some things that we did in the state. I'm
Thank
pretty
you.
proud of.
Thank you. We are at time, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you maybe in 10 seconds, what is someone who is on the receiving end of advocacy? I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, I was up in Albany for Advocacy Day, talking to our elected folks to say these are the things that we, the citizens, want. Now I'm turning I'm turning this on you for those watching us today. When we are going to come to you, what should we be saying? What case should we be making to ensure that as a legislator, you know that this is what the community want? I know we have 30 seconds, but if you can just give us one key thing.
Flood my emails, flood my voicemails, flood my phone lines, flood everybody else's phone lines. Sou pa pale, ou koman pou di moun? Fò di moun son bezwen. You have to let people know closed mouths don't get fed.
That's
You
right.
want me to care about it? Email me. I get 10,000. I legit get over thousands of emails about bike lanes. But you know who isn't emailing me? Immigration TPS. I'll tell you that. No one's emailing me about that. Care if it's the federal level or local level. Email me and
Yep.
I'll pay attention. I see
Email you,
Joseph
call you.
laugh
That's
like
the
that.
word. If you didn't hear anything else today, you need to remember that the way that you're going to influence your elected official is to email and call them. That's the job. It's not harassment. It's the way that they count and look at whether this is an issue you care about and that they need to do something about. Thank you so much, Assemblymember. Really appreciate those words of wisdom. We're going to get to the next subject, which is about education and the future of public education in particular. And for this one, it is Representative Joseph from Colorado who's going to talk to us a bit about it. Representative Joseph represents Colorado House District 10 and serves as Majority Caucus co-chair, according to the Colorado General Assembly. She has been a fervent advocate for working people. As a lawyer and a minority small business owner, she has used her tenacity and problem-solving skills to support evidence-based, humane solutions to challenge the disparities in the criminal justice system, homelessness, and climate justice. All three really important subjects, but now we're going to ask Representative Joseph to sort of talk to us a little bit about the issue of education and the future of public education as it relates to our community. Representative Joseph?
Thank you. Good evening or late afternoon, depending on where you live. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with you today. Thank you to NHAEON, to HAPC, and Avanse Ansanm for bringing us together today for this important conversation. For so many Haitian families, education is more than public service. It is the reason many parents sacrifice everything to come to this country. It is the promise that their children would have a better opportunity. It is the belief that hard work, learning, and perseverance can create a better future. That belief has shaped generations of immigrant families across America. Public education has long been one of the greatest tools for upward mobility in this country. It helped working families to enter the middle class. It opened doors for Black families who had been systematically denied opportunities. It created pathways for a generation of students, immigrant communities, and young people who simply needed someone to believe in them. And that is exactly why the attacks we're seeing on our public education today are so dangerous. Because when public education is weakened, it is not just the wealthy communities that suffer. It is the Black families who suffer. It is the student learning English. It is children with disabilities. It is working parents trying to give their kids a fair shot. Today, we're seeing efforts to dismantle or drastically weaken the education system and our public board of educations, the very agency responsible for protecting students' civil rights, support low-income students, enforcing disability protections, and helping millions of students access financial aid for college. I'm sorry, you all hear pings coming as I'm talking because it's coming from my computer because it's tied to my phone. At the same time, public schools are facing a growing crisis, a growing funding crisis. Schools are being asked to do more with less every single year. Teachers are expected to educate students, support mental health needs, address learning loss, communicate across language barriers, and navigate an increasing political pressure, often without the resources they need. And still, they show up every day for our children. But we cannot ignore what is happening to the teaching profession. According to the Learning Policy Institute, more than 411,000 teaching positions nationwide are either unfulfilled or staffed by educators who are not fully licensed. That means roughly one in every 8 teaching positions in America is impacted by the teacher shortage crisis. This is not sustainable. Teachers are not leaving because of burnout, low pay, lack of respect, and constant political attacks on education. When schools cannot recruit or retain qualified teachers and educators, student loses access to stability, mentorship, and quality learning environment. We are also witnessing increasing attacks on our curriculum. Diversity programs, an honest conversation about history and our identity, especially as Black and Brown people, including Black and Brown people who identify themselves as LGBTQ+. Book bans are on the rise, teachers are being censured, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are being targeted across the country, but representation and education still matters. Students deserve to see themselves reflected in their classrooms. They deserve to learn accurate history. They deserve schools that celebrate diversity instead of fearing it. For Haitian students, Black students, and immigrant students, these attacks send a painful message that their stories, their cultures, and their lived experiences are somehow controversial or unworthy of acknowledgement. That cannot be the future of education in America. We must also talk about language access. Too many immigrant parents are still excluded from conversations about their children's education because translation and interpretation services are inconsistent or unavailable. Parents cannot fully advocate for their children if they do not have access to information in a language they understand. Language access should not be optional. It is essential. Educational inequities continue to disproportionately impact Black students and Haitian students across this country. Black students are more likely to attend underfunded schools, which I've attended myself, more likely to face disproportionate disciplines, and less likely to have access to advanced coursework and gifted programs. These issues have been happening for many, many years. These disparities are not because our students lack talent or ability. They exist because systems have historically failed to invest equally in every child. Then there is a growing crisis of college affordability. For many immigrant families, college represents the fulfillment of years of sacrifice. But higher education continues to become more expensive while financial aid systems have become increasingly difficult to navigate. Last year's FAFSA rollout was plagued with technical failures and delays that left students and families scrambling. According to the Government Accountability Office review, the rollout problems contributed to more than 400,000 fewer students completing the FAFSA applications, disproportionately impacting low-income students. For first-generation students and immigrant families already navigating a complicated system, those failures have real consequences. And beyond academic failures, we must acknowledge the emotional and mental challenges students faced every day. Young people are dealing with anxiety, violence, economic uncertainty, discrimination, and social isolation at levels we've never seen before. School cannot simply be places where students memorize information. They must also be places where students feel safe, supported, and valued.
Representative Joseph, thank you. I mean, you've painted an amazing picture here of the challenges that we face. And I think it is important for our community to understand, because if you don't understand, you can't move to the next level of doing something. And the picture that you're painting here is one that is bad. But we want to I want to link this a little bit to what it means, right, for our community, long-term economic and political power, because this is tied, education is tied to all of this. And I'll say that, just to echo what you said before, this administration started, when it first got into office, attacking colleges, attacking education. It was not an accident. They started to remove all of the things that would make us able to think and question. And so I have two questions for you. The time was up, but we have 2 minutes. One is, as a business person who is focused on education, what does this mean for our community in terms of long-term economic and political power? And the second, as a lawyer and a small business owner and a legislator, someone who has had to solve really difficult problems with limited resources, what do you want Haitian American parents and grandparents and even young people who are in this room, what do you want them to do concretely? What do we need to think about when we think about protecting education and make sure our community has a seat at the table? So economic impact and political power, as well as how do we transform that into action from our community?
Thank you for that question. So I hear partly, because that compounded questions are hard.
So let's start. I'll just start with the first one then.
Yes.
What does it mean for our community in terms of long-term economic and political power?
Yes, again, education is not just for education's sake. Education is tied to the workforce. Without an educated constituency, it's going to be very hard, right, for people to be integrated into our economic structure or into our economic system. And also, to your point, within our education system, this is where young people learn civic duty, civic participation, civic collaboration. So if a young person is not educated or the education system is lacking, they're less likely to do what I believe it was Councilwoman Farah who mentioned, call me, reach out to me, send me a letter. You're not going to be able to do that. You will think, well, is that something that I can do? Is that something that I should do, right? Should I participate? Should I contribute to the system? So in essence, the barriers to education will disproportionately impact or working families. And also, I wanted to note, by the way, as I was doing research for this particular conversation, I just wanted to note to you the amount of funding that is being spent on education. According to the US spending.gov, you could go to that website and look at the amount of money that is being spent on education. $135.84 billion. And we're also spending $2.8 trillion of our budget for defense. So that tells you where our priorities are as a nation, right? Our priorities seems to be more on defense as opposed to educating our youth. That is problematic because we know without economic viability, we don't have a strong country.
Thank you for that. And the last question, if you can take 30 seconds, is around what should we do? What can we do? What do you recommend that we do?
Yeah. The most important thing I believe what we can do as Haitian people, as Black and Brown people, is to organize. And it went back to what Council Assemblywoman Forrest talked about. We have to organize. We have to show up. And even if we have to stand outside of the door and banging, we have to do it in order for our elected officials to understand our plight and to hear from us, and in order for them to be able to come up with a plan for us. At the end of the day, if you're not at the table, I've heard this before, I'm not the one who came up with it, you are on the menu. And you don't want to be on the menu while you're not in the room.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. And so we hear the theme that having, and Vanessa started this for us when in her introduction, electing people is just one step in the process. But it is an ongoing process. And what I'm hearing from our elected officials here is that even when you have your elected people in office, you need to still be standing outside their doors. You need to be blowing up their phones. You need to be blowing up their emails because you're not the only constituents they have. And so the squeaky wheels gets the grease. Just because you elected someone, you were not the only one who elected them. So there will be other groups of people, including business people, who are going to be blowing up their phone, blowing up their emails, so that their issues are the ones that gets discussed. So that's what I'm hearing as the theme of the conversation here tonight. We're going to switch, and I want to say thank you again to all of the folks who are watching. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you for your for watching and for listening. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions a little bit later. We are getting to our last subject right now. That is going to be on very appropriate. And I think, the organizers really planned this right because they have this one, which is about voting rights and civic engagement. I know the two ladies who organized this. They knew how to plan this thing. And so we're closing with Joanne Antoine, who is the executive director of Common Cause Maryland. Joanne is responsible for creating and implementing the Maryland organization's policy campaign and building its capacity. Common Cause is one of the state's most effective watchdog. Remember that word, people, the watchdog groups working at every level of government on priorities that impact each of our lives. We just talked about immigration. We talked about cost of living and affordability. We talked about education. Now, Joanne is going to talk about how we hold government accountable for those priorities and defending the right to vote, because none of this matter if they know that you can't hold them accountable through your vote. So we need to be able to limit big money, and that's what Joanne is working on, that influence our election, holding public officials accountable, and more. So to that end, I'm gonna pass it over to you, Joanne. I want to for you to. You're also gonna get between 7 and 10 minutes. The thing will ring at 8, and then we'll have another 2 minutes. So can you talk to us about, Joanne, what people need to know about the Voting Rights Act as a landmark achievement, and more importantly, the work that you're doing and how that's tied in to what we're talking about tonight?
Thank you so much, Johnny. And I always grateful to Avanse, Ansanm, NHAEON for being really intentional about creating spaces where we could talk to the community, ensure that you're informed, especially at this urgent moment. Like, I think that is what's needed when we're trying to move towards a participatory democracy. I don't even know where to start, right? I'm going to try to wind it down, right? But I mean, it's a scary time, right, in American democracy. A lot has happened under the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, so much so that we can't even keep up with the executive orders and so forth. But it's important that in the midst of all of that, even all of the issues that that other panelists just talked about, that we understand that our ability to vote and have that vote counted in a meaningful way is under attack. Now, in planning for this event, I was talking to a family member. I was sharing how voting is a right and so forth. And, he's a naturalized citizen. He views it very differently, right? I think for him, it's more, coming into the country, being able to become a legal resident and so forth. He views it as a privilege, right? I could see the combination of the two, right? Because he understands, like many others, that like coming here, he didn't need to be provided that right. And I think for all of us, understanding the significance of the moment that we're in, that Black voting rights, that means our rights also are under attack. And while most of our community may not have played a role, decades ago in gaining that right, we do have a responsibility knowing that African Americans who literally were murdered, for fighting for this right, that we stand up and fight with them in order to protect it, as well as maintain our political power. So I don't know how familiar folks are with the federal VRA. I'll just, I think just wide overview, federal VRA of 1965, right? It was created to prohibit, racial discrimination in our voting. And unfortunately, what we've seen in this Louisiana v. Calais decision, and I'll go through it in more detail, is we're pretty much saying that is no longer an effective tool. Now, I want to make sure we understand how we got here, right? When we look at how race has been handled in this country, we need to remember that African Americans were taking tests, in order for governments to decide whether or not they were even smart enough to vote, right? Let alone engage in our democracy and their vote. And beyond that, I think it's important that we understand also that white supremacy is ingrained in the system overall, right? And that it was built this way in order for us to have to, I would say, fight for everything, bits by bits, and to chip away at the structures that were there. So I think I say that because it's important that we understand that what we see happening with the VRA and other issues, it didn't start under Trump 2.0. Right? Trump is just a symptom of this, right? This had started long before, where even when the VRA was passed, we saw that Republicans were already trying to get rid of it and gut it as much as they can, even back in the 60s. Now, I wanted to give the decision is complicated, but I want to make sure we understand how catastrophic and damaging it is. Right? We didn't think that the Supreme Court was we knew that they were going to narrow Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits local governments from implementing, this discriminatory voting processes, which we'll talk through. We didn't think, that they would go so far, right? As to, say that, we can't use, let's name VRA or Voting Rights Act, right? That we can't consider race anymore, that what we're going to do is focus on partisan politics when we're drawing our lines. Now, I know redistricting is really wonky. I don't even like the issue, but, the way that we draw our district lines at the congressional level, the county level, the municipal level, that determines our political power. So when we're hearing from Representative Joseph, Representative Forrest, right? I don't know the makeup of their districts, but if they were majority Black, right? What they can do right now is cut a piece of it, draw it in a very distinct way where it is that much more difficult for these Haitian elected officials to be able to maintain their seats, right? So what we saw out of Louisiana, this is the Louisiana v. Calais decision that, was argued in front of the Supreme Court. it was just that example, right? Where we challenged their map in order to show, prove racial discrimination. And Supreme Court basically rejected it and said, you all gave the state the clearance to go ahead and very quickly, butcher up their maps. And that is what we're seeing happening all throughout the state, all throughout the South. And that is not the worst part of it, right? That is just one thing. I think the worst part is that they gutted the last remaining piece of the Voting Rights Act that protected us, again, from discrimination in the redistricting process. Okay, that means that again, I've said the way that maps are drawn determines our political power. They've told the red state right now, go ahead, carve out those majority minority districts, and that, again, thinking about, I think it was Vanessa that shared the number of elected Haitian leaders that we have. It would over time impact that, right? And even in a blue state like mine, while it doesn't impact us as much at the state level, understanding that when we go down further at the local level, the representation already wasn't there, and that conservatives, racist conservatives, right, are going to jump in any moment they can in order to get rid of those seats. And, again, when we look at the comments from the justices who made this decision, you'll see that they, while they gutted it, they tried to disguise it as like a fix and so forth. And instead, what they've left us with is no recourse for proving how, going beyond the partisan politics of it all, that we are no longer supposed to consider race. Now, when we look at the significance of this, right, when we talk about a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational democracy, right? A lot of those problems that we're thinking about on the day-to-day, our education, immigration rights, and so forth, right? A lot of that is decided at the local level, in addition to the state level, right? And what we'll see over time as a result of the cutting of the Federal Voting Rights Act is less representation, right? It is going to be even more difficult in order for us to maintain the elected seats that we have, in order for us to, gain new ones. And when we think about, wanting leaders like Representative Junie, like Representative Forrest, who are from similar backgrounds, who understand our values, the things that we deal with on a day-to-day, all of that will be impacted, and the possibility, we might possibly no longer have individuals like that sitting in our seat. And I just wanted to give an example beyond, redistricting, right? When we talk about vote dilution, it also includes these practices where we talk about discriminatory at large, right? So when we're thinking you live in the county, I don't know, Juniper County, right? You live in District 3. Who should vote for the people that live in District 3? The residents, the voters of District 3. Instead, what we see when we're looking at large processes, right, is that everyone in that county is deciding who represents me. Now, when we look at it at a larger scale, if we have a lot of Haitians, a lot of Black people in an area, right, we could have elected someone in District 3. But because we're going to these more, conservative parts of the state, more, white parts of the area, right, our votes are diluted and we can't get the representation that we need there, right? And that's even in a state like Maryland, where we still use systems like that. So, it's,
Yeah,
the
Joanne,
idea.
I know.
I guess it's a lot, right? Yeah.
It is a lot, but I'll just boil it down to this. As Santra and Vanessa and many of the folks in Florida knows, even when I was living in Haiti, I used to fly to Florida to go canvass in Florida, and people would ask me why, and I would say, I live in New York. I live in a blue state. I can vote before I leave New York for whatever I want. And so if I have the time and I have the ability to do it, I am going to go to a place. I've gone to either Florida or I'll go to Atlanta. So I look at where we are a majority, not majority in terms of the size of the full population, but where there's a lot of Haitian Americans in that particular county or that particular district or that particular state, and say, if I am going to canvas, let me go and mobilize my fellow Haitians, because that's the place where we could build power. And so Now what you're saying to us is that blanc ouais jouet là, li kon jouet là parce que nous va essayer de créer jouet li.
Oui.
Donc li dit la point central a mettel juste en haut au palo cam pas connaît. La point Vanessa la plague le bas South Florida. And then all of a sudden, even though they're living like right next to each other, all of a sudden they find themselves in completely different parts. And it dilutes their ability to coalesce into one district and have their own representative. And that is the game that they're playing. So we have some questions that came through from folks who are watching. Before I ask them, I have one last question for you. Obviously, every single issues that we just talked about here tonight, TPS, cost of living, education, runs through holding political power. Who holds it and who does not? Asian Americans are one of the fastest growing communities. And our communities range, of course, from folks who came in the recent CHNV program to folks who have been here since the 70s, and then the big wave of migration in the 80s and 90s. I came in the 80s. And so when you think about those from your work at Common Cause, what are sort of the structural barriers? And I think we had begun to hear some of them already that could translate or has not translate our numbers into power, and what does it cost us really? And then I'll just go to the questions from that we got.
I mean, beyond, running for office and so forth, I think what we see many times in the legislature is a lack of political will, right? Like under this administration, they laid out a blueprint, right? They were very strategic. Project 2025, I think there's a 2026 now, right? We knew all of what was coming. And what we see are elected leaders who are kind of like waiting and functioning in this reactionary way where as if, we know that if Maryland does this, maybe it helps a bit more in New York and Florida, right? And I think it's a combination of things, right? Elected leaders are hearing from me all the time, right? I'm paid to do it, so they're not that responsive to me. But when they are hearing from a constituent, right, they are forced to pay attention and hopefully more likely to take some action. I think what we need to do is remember that a lot of them are on the ballot, right? I don't know when most of your primaries are. For us, it's in June, and we should be, actively not just calling them while they're in office, right? We should be showing up to their town halls. We should be trying everything we can to get them on the record so that when they're elected, we can hold them accountable, right? We should be looking at where they're getting their money from and why you're unwilling, to support this, how would you say, preventing, banning 287Gs and so forth, right? So I think it's the community coming to events like these, equipping ourselves to make our voices heard at a larger scale. And I think forcing leaders to pay attention to us.
Thank you for that. So let me just jump into some of the questions we have, and any one of the panelists could come in and add and answer. But the first one was, is there a plan just in case the decision in the TPS case does not go the way we were hoping it would go? So what are we thinking about? Is there a conversation in the community about what do we do next if this doesn't work out?
Well, I can prompt this and hopefully, excuse me, I'm on the phone. I can prompt this and maybe Tessa will join in and give her legal background. But one of the things that we made sure to have in this New York State is boost up access to representation, actually putting money aside. Sorry, putting the money aside to make sure that our communities have access to lawyers to address their individual cases. What I've also been doing is partnering up with different groups. For example, locally, we have Little Haiti BK to do town halls in the community to tell people about how to make sure our children have a active plan just in case something happens to the parent. What can be done with the children? Identifying people in the community, and also how to liquidate your assets and put them in a place where if something should happen to you, how can you still have access to your money? And so these are the different conversations that we can have locally, that we are having locally across Brooklyn and the other 5 boroughs and the other 4 boroughs. but we need to rely heavily on our legal partners to help lead each individual in their individual problem.
Yeah. And Tessa, before I turn it over to you, I see that you're ready to give us an answer. I just want to share one last thing, Assembly Member Forrest, is that as you work with different organizations and potentially fund some of them, one of the things we need to keep in mind and help folks with is to understand that there's going to be a lot of folks out there trying to rip off our people. A lot of folks have gotten some assets here, and they may not necessarily understand how to protect those assets. And it will be extremely important that we give information to folks about how to properly protect their assets so that bad seeds in our community don't take advantage of them. So I just wanted to make that as an ask, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tessa.
Thank you, Johnny. Ditto to what Assemblymember Forrest mentioned. We also, the number I gave earlier, the hotline, the 888-600-5762. Another thing that we do is we help people do what they call the family emergency plan, which takes them to the process of finding delegates for their children, their assets, everything that they're doing, and helping them make the tough decisions in case something happens. But the question is also, if it doesn't go, there are Haitian groups that are coming together that are having weekly, bi-weekly conversations on what an emergency plan can look like for the Haitian community around the United States, right? It's called LACU Collaborative, and it's the OSHA members, which is, I believe, it's organizations serving Haitian Americans nationally. They meet weekly and bi-weekly, having those conversations. The situation is a little bit different. For example, at FLIC, we do help a lot of children be reunited with their parents who have been deported. It's a little bit different with the Haitians because I'm pretty sure any Haitian parent who's deported will be hesitant to have the child united with them back in Haiti. But the other issue, the other fear that we have is that, and you mentioned it also earlier, it's about the education that we need to do for our community. There was a time where the Haitian community has an issue of reste avec. We have to be very careful that it doesn't happen again when you have children who are left behind. And there is also the emotional and mental impact that children's separation from their parents has on these kids. And these are lifelong traumas, right? So there needs to be a lot of, we need to address the mental health crisis that is happening. It's not just going to happen if TPS is not renewed. Yes, there's going to be one thing. There is also a mental health crisis that is happening, that has been happening with our Haitian community since February, being on survival mode, hiding in their homes, not being able to go out. Children are afraid. Children are feeling and seeing the fear of their parents. And they probably are unable to answer the parents can't answer the questions, and they might also be afraid to ask the parents those questions that are going through their mind. So there is a lot that we need to do in the Haitian community to protect our community. We know that having mental health conversation is not really part of our culture, but it is something that is needed for our community now. And I mean, there's been groups that have invited immigration lawyers from Canada, that have invited, lawyers from different countries, trying to figure out what is the thing that can be done by different countries. There were conversations with Brazil at some point that didn't lead to anything. I think there needs to be also a lot of education in our communities on the other options that are out there, right? The United States is not the it.
Yeah.
It's not the all in all. So also invite people to process the idea of having to relocate again.
Yeah. Yeah. A terrible, difficult decision, but one given the context back home that one has to consider. There's a related question that has to do with what will be done to protect Haitian community from being abused by ICE. And I know that there are sort of different responses in different states. and even different localities. But just wanted to kind of put it out there in terms of one question that someone asked about, what will be done to protect the Haitian community from being abused by ICE? If you have any sense of what's happening and how we are sort of like responding to ICE raids. I know like New York City, for example, has a different policy approach to this. Many other state or cities don't collaborate with ICE, but we just want to open it up here to see if there's some feedback to the person who asked the question.
Johnny, I wanted to add to the conversation, and it ties in exactly to the conversation on how are we protecting communities or immigrant communities. In Colorado, we have many communities that are considered sanctuary cities. Nonetheless, even those communities that are considered sanctuary counties, our county put out a statement that we do comply with federal law. However, we want to ensure that people are protected and their constitutional rights are protected.
That's right.
And also in Colorado, we've passed laws where we do not coordinate as a state or as a community, or law enforcement are there to protect our community, not to cooperate with ICE in order to get rid of our own community members.
Mm-hmm.
And also to some of the work that I've done at the legislature. And also I wanted to note that immigration is a federal issue. It's very, very hard for us to impact the immigration structure or system as state legislators, county employees. It's very hard, but there are ways to support our communities. I passed a bill this year at the Colorado State Legislature that says that if you are an employer, you cannot keep somebody's ID or their passport, their driver's license permanently, and you cannot call ICE on them because of, if you just want to discriminate against them. And the person can file a suit, and also it is also, there's penalties, criminal penalties attached, because we take these issues very strongly. And we know, as you've noted, that we do have a rogue, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, what's going on at the federal level right now is unacceptable, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. We have community members who are being killed on the streets if they stand up for each other. That should never be happening in America. And that's why we passed those bills. Last year, I passed a bill around or information, meaning data from the Department of Human Services, not be shared with the Department of Human Services for the purpose of spying on people or selling that information. That's one of the bills. And we've passed a lot of other immigration bills to protect our community members, but so far we've not been able to keep ICE out of the state. That's something that is practically impossible. But we can do some work to protect our communities, which we have done.
Thank you for that. Yes, Assembly member.
And Representative Joseph talks about this collusion, right? The state, I love that the state is taking on this perspective that we're not colluding. But the reason why there is such a push to collude is that ultimately we have, and I'm telling you, as a state that is a donor state, there is extreme poverty across our communities. When we're talking about affordability, it's not just affordability, it's lack of access at every point. Education, social services, getting to the supermarket, getting the gas, leaving your house, having leisure. Dare I say, enjoy my life. And so there's a part of this that we're not talking about a lot. When the administration chooses to do tax cut on the ultra wealthy and giving away $12 billion, that's a conversation that should be bipartisan. Because regardless of what I think is big government, little government, that at the end of the day, if I work hard for my money, somebody else should not be taking my money and going to Cancun or the moon or under the sea in a submarine. That is not unacceptable. That is unacceptable. So, behind a lot of these conversations we're having in New York State is to talk about revenue. Who is paying in and who is getting out? Because at the end of the day, you touch me, help me with these kids, all right, tax me, no problem. But if I'm paying taxes and I'm getting nothing in return, no, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. You should be upset. You should be upset. Right now, there's a $12 billion giveaway, minimum, to some people, but yet there are children in my community, and I live in a rich community, that are going without food.
Yeah. Oh, it's Assembly Member. It is the most abhorrent thing in a country as rich, and I'll say in New York, as a city or a state as rich as it is, and to have 20 to 30% of our fellow resident not have enough to eat. It is just it is I, like I just can't even find the words for it, right? And then we find there's always a money problem, but then we find trillions. We just spent $29 billion to do some adventure in Iran. We just created $29 billion, and then they have the nerve to say they want to increase the budget for the military to $1 trillion. It's like this. It's crazy. Like this. So we don't have a money problem. There is no money problem ever. It's just that we have a priority problem and we don't care about people, right? And so that's why I think it's important to have this conversation, because people need to be aware about what it is that we are, this sort of like this world that we're living in the ways in which we can influence what's happening. Our deputy mayor here in New York,
Add something, Johnny.
and
They
I
can't hear
feel
me.
truly blessed to be in a place where I can be thinking
He's not gonna be
about
able to hear me.
the affordability issues, thinking about not just issues of healthcare, even though it's economic development, it is tied. Thinking about housing, thinking about childcare. Those are projects that we're working on right now. And the way that her and the mayor think about this, they want us to be able to track giving people their time back. I swear I did not know what that meant. And then I had to think of, like, life should not be about I get up at 5, I get to work at 6:30, I come home at 8, I barely get to see my children. I do that 6 times a week. I go to church on Sunday, and then that's it for 40 years. And as a black man, I'm probably going to be dead at 69 or 70. That's it. With all the stress.
So,
So the mayor and the deputy mayor is like, we want to hold you accountable to giving people their time, because that's the thing that's more important. So I'm like really blown away in the things that I'm learning right now. But anyway,
so
I don't want
Johnny, I expect a memo of support of my 4-day work week bill. Thank you very much for endorsing giving us back our time. I'll be
giving you
waiting
back your
for the
time.
memo. Thank
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'll take maybe, is it okay, Santra, if I take 2 more questions that we have here, and I think we can wrap up, and we'll ask everyone to sort of maybe take a couple of minutes to just some last word, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Santra. Okay, so we'll do that. So next question that we have is this one is specifically about NHAEON, and it is from the conferences that NHAEON have organized over the years. Are there programs that are currently being implemented that directly benefit the Haitian community, or that folks can access online or review online? So if there are things that NHAEON is working on for the folks who are elected, maybe they can share some of that information.
I'm a member of NHAEON, and I think our president is also on this Zoom. I'd have to say that I'm very impressed with the work of NHAEON, even though it may not seem, people know a lot of the work that we have done or the work that the leadership within NHAEON has done. They do a lot of advocacy with the White House on behalf of our Haitian community. And whenever you hear there is TPS, there was a lot of work and advocacy on that as well, and outreach to legislators in Congress. And also through NHAEON, there was a bill that was introduced in order to put $1 billion toward infrastructure for Haiti. Although that bill has been introduced, it hasn't moved yet because of new challenges in Congress. But NHAEON is doing a lot of work on behalf of our Haitian community. And I wanted to note as well too, I represent a district that is about 91% white and 8% other, 1%, less than 1% Black. And to be able to be part of NHAEON and to be able to advocate on behalf of the Haitian community is truly inspiring. And I'm very grateful to be part of this organization.
Thank you. And the last question we'll take is one around this sort of this effort that we just had together. We know our community is pretty vibrant, even though sometimes it is fragmented. What steps, and I'll just make this the last question for those of you on the line here, what steps can national and local organizations take to create a more unified advocacy agenda and produce measurable results? What can we do together? What are the key things maybe some ideas we can sort of point to as ways for us to begin to kind of do what Vanessa talked about earlier, as well as what Santra mentioned to us in the opening? Joanne, I don't know if you wanted to start out.
What we're doing to organize our community.
What could we do to,
Yeah. I think beyond coming to events like these, which I want to encourage, they keep us informed and so forth. I would say, if you have the capacity, if there's organizations around you, like a Common Cause, right? A lot of times we are doing things like legislative trainings, right? We're here to equip you on how to write testimony, how to come to the legislature and provide oral comments, right? How to center your story of self, because that is what is going to many times assist with the advocacy. I think making sure if you're eligible that you vote, right? If you are someone who isn't registered, especially at this moment. I know we say every single election is critical, but because of what just happened, it is critical that Black people come out at significant ways throughout the country, right? So doing so there. And I think making sure we're working in coalition, right? Most of the reforms that we've talked about, most of the issues that we've discussed, no one organization is able to move that bill, right? And many times what we're doing with legislators is we are working in partnership, because even though Representative Joseph is, doing all she can, she needs cover. She needs us to go talk to every member of the legislature and so forth. So if you care about education, you care about immigration, regardless if your state is blue or red, honestly, these are the two issues where, we are having the biggest fights in the legislature, even here where we have the one sitting Black governor in the country, right? So making sure that you use your voice, that you are coordinating with organizations like Avanse, Ansanm, where you can work in coalition. Even if you're afraid to testify, you do art, right? You could be the one that's creating the flyer for them and so forth, but using your skills to support the efforts that are happening.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know who wants to go next. Representative Joseph? And as you think about it, I'll just repeat the question for Assemblymember Forrest, which is, the question is, the Haitian American community is vibrant and sometimes fragmented. So we were just sort of looking at, as a closing statement, what are some of the steps that we can be thinking about nationally or locally in terms of the organizations that we're part of to create a more unified advocacy agenda and that produce measurable results?
Well, I was saying, and I won't let anybody else say it, but I say it because I don't really care. Look, yes, call my phone. Call Representative Joseph's phone. But you know what really get me moving is when you put your dollars together. Okay, why I say this? The reason why we have certain people getting money to fund wars in certain areas is because they come out. They come out, they say, Sarah, you have a big problem. You need to be elected again. And How can we help you? Okay, help me, get me outside and get me back at my job again. And now keep coming back. That person, they don't even need to send an email no more. They already got me.
Mm.
But I don't take that money. Okay. I don't take that money. I don't take that pharmacology money. I don't take a lot of dollars. Okay. But let me tell you, anybody who tell you that they give money and they don't pick up the phone, they're lying to your face. So
Mhm.
let me tell you something. You really want to influence? Don't worry about me. I have your back. Haitian people, I have your back. But you really want to influence people? The representatives that are in your district, when they vote good, send them $100.
Mm.
When they vote bad, tell them I'm gonna call everybody else not to give you $1.
Mm.
That's how you move real power because cash rules everything around me.
Greed gets the money.
Unfortunately,
Dollar bill, yo.
dollar bills, y'all.
Listen, I'm an immigrant, but I know that one. So we'll close with you. Thank you so much, Assembly Member Forrest. We'll close with you, Representative Joseph, and then we'll pass it over to Santra.
Yeah, I think everything that has been mentioned is important, right? In the policy continuum, you need advocacy, you need money. But to your question on what organizations need to do to build their momentum and their power within that structure, for me, having been a legislator, and there are groups that have supported me to get me into office. And as soon as I get elected, it's almost like they say, sayonara, Junie. You figure it out on your own. You don't hear from them. And I'm hearing the conversation, and there are times, and I am a pretty progressive Democrat, and those organizations are super progressive. And I'm looking at bills and I'm like, well, this bill, when I read it myself based on my own understanding, it doesn't seem like it hurts anybody. And then I'll vote yes for it. And then that's when I hear at the end of session, oh, Representative Joseph, we wish you didn't vote this way. We wish you would have voted that way. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't you reach out to me as an organization? And by the way, too, there were times where I felt that why aren't these organizations reaching out when the lobby at the Capitol, the lobby of the powerful and the corporations, let me tell you, they have no problem picking up the phone and calling me. No problem at all. Not only they'll call me, they'll show up at my door and waiting for me before I come to my office. They wait for me at the end of committee. I mean, these people know where to find me. They'll call my friends, they'll call my family members, and I think organizations and nonprofits need to also do some of that work. But I understand sometimes those who work in nonprofits are not well paid, right? They have second job or they're just doing this work voluntarily. So it's how do we build the capacity of these nonprofits so that they can do more of that work and also maybe increase pay? Well, I'm speaking more hypothetically here, right? But the issue is that we need more collaborations with our nonprofit. They need to do more outreach to us, and they also need to connect with the NHAEONs. And I think, Joanne, you mentioned something which I really appreciate your take, that no one person can pass a bill. I've introduced legislation, and I notice now I need to find a coalition somewhere. I need to find a group of people or organizations to help me move it through. So I think, again, if a small organization wants to build their capacity, they need to find other organizations to support and ask them to support them as well.
Fantastic.
Can I very quickly share one last example? I mean, just on that, just to kind of, I do think it's important that we take time to read about, the civil rights movement, right? I think, when we are talking about all these things that we want to accomplish, one, as a community, it's important to understand the struggle and the fight to begin with. But I think a lot of the tactics that they were using is going to inform a lot of what we're going to have to do over the next few years. So if nothing at all, take some time to do your research, to explore things that you can do in order to move the bills that, Representative Forrest and Joseph are working on, right? So I hope that y'all make that a priority, if nothing at all.
Yes, and I wrote a piece about this that I published last weekend because I felt that it was really important to help my fellow Haitians understand the sacrifice. Like we're proud Haitians, and we should be. What we don't understand sometimes is that we're standing on the shoulders of other proud people who sacrifice a lot so that we can walk through some doors here in the United States. And so I wrote this article and really wanted to make the case for fellow Haitians to both respect, understand, and develop coalition with our fellow Haitian Americans, but all other communities, whether Hispanic communities. We need that coalition in order for us to move together. I did have someone tell me that they were not moved by that piece, that there are no problems because the Democrats are lying. But okay, all skin folk and kinfolk, so that's all right. But I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. I feel blessed, and I've learned a lot in terms of what you do and how we can move as a community. I want to say thank you to NHAEON for the work that NHAEON continues to do. Thank you to the Haitian American Professional Coalition, who's also part of this. And thank you to Avanse Ansanm. To that end, I'll say thank you to everyone who's been watching and for your questions. We really appreciate you. Have a good night. But for me, and I'll pass it over to Santra. Thank you. Good night.
Well, Johnny, we're the ones who have to thank you for steering us through this conversation. And thank you to Tessa, Assembly Member Farah, Soufran Forrest, Representative Joseph, and Joanne. And thank you to each and every single one of you who actually stuck it through with us tonight, malgré all the technical difficulties. And I'll be honest, there were more than maybe 250 people who registered for this event. And so we wanted to give you the production quality that we feel that you deserve to have, and also curate a space that really reflected the substance of what we're discussing here. So y'all hopped on and then told your friends to hop on and crashed our link. So that's why we had to get a new one. But next time we will be ready for all of you. We really didn't expect such an overwhelming interest in this, but I'm glad we did it because we did cover a lot. We talked about immigration and TPS, and not as an isolated issue, but we talked also about how that plays into the cost of living and affordability crisis, housing, groceries. We talked about healthcare, childcare. We talked about education, voting rights, right? And I know we couldn't get every question answered, but I do hope that you learned enough to know that there are problems, but also to be clear on the fact that we have solutions.
Yeah, thank you so much again to Johnny and everyone, all of our amazing panelists. Mfia de nous, you all really represent our community well. When we're looking around and thinking about who will we send? Who can speak on our behalf? We're super proud that y'all are at tables really making decisions on behalf of our communities. I want people to know that all of the issues that we talked about are connected. Immigration is connected to work, which is connected to housing, which is connected to health, connected to education. Education is connected to opportunity. Representative Joseph really talks about that. And that is connected to our political power. When we think about political power, we're talking about the collective, not just what one individual can do, one organization can do, one issue area that we care about, but what we can do collectively. And that's what we hope to continue to discuss and put into practice as well.
And I think a lot of the work that we need to get done has already started, because I know a lot of people are probably asking the question, now what happens, right? We have this town hall, and then where do we go from here? And so Santra and I know for sure have already started the work. A lot of you who are in community with us have been part of that. We're actually in the midst of planning two very important convenings. We're working on the National Haitian American Policy Agenda, which is a unified statement of our priorities as a community. And we're also working on the campaign school. So as it relates to the policy agenda, if you're a policy wonk, or maybe you're already working on policy issues, Maybe you can provide us some support on the back end, whether it's through planning, helping us write it up, get resources. We need you, right? We need anybody who can contribute to this effort in whatever way that you can contribute. We're also, tossing around the idea of maybe doing a survey, and we would love for you all to respond to that. And for the campaign and candidate school that we have in the works, we're looking for folks who are interested in running for office. And if that's you, then when we launch, we need you to apply to join the candidate school. But if you're just interested in learning about how to advocate on an issue, but you're not sure that you actually want to run for office, this is still for you, because we're going to give you the infrastructure to make advocacy happen. So we're going to need funds. We're going to need participants. We're going to need people ready to train folks. And so think about where you can fit in and let us know.
Yeah, I'd like to say that we want to be serious about serious matters. It is Haitian Heritage Month, and there's so many festivities, but we also have people who not are entertainers, but they are the people who are putting forth good policies. And many of our speakers are working on issues that matter to us the most. We're often thinking about large initiatives that might get limelight when people are asking, what can you do? But that's not what it takes. What it takes is, Joanne talked about reading. As Black immigrants, we need to know what Johnny said as well. We need to know how we got here, how we are afforded the rights that we have here. It's not enough for us to just be here. We have to know what allowed the conditions for us to be able to thrive, lowercase thrive, here in this nation. We also spoke about it takes calling and emailing and showing up. We talked about what it means to be a watchdog organization. We need to watch what our elected officials are doing and make sure that not only call, email, but that if we have funds that we donate to the ones who are doing the good work and tell our folks not to fund the ones who are not, right? Find a common cause chapter near you. Volunteer, donate, join an organization, be on late night strategy calls. It is not the limelight events. It is not the grander events that really make the work happen. It is when all of us are putting together our individual capacities to add to the larger pot. That's how we move things forward. And an example I would give you is that with Haitian American Professionals Coalition, there's a small group of us who've been talking about TPS bi-weekly 4 months, right? Who do we need to call? Who still hasn't voted on the discharge petition? What do we need to do? Where do we have relationships? And that is not something that we're advertising online. That is work that we know we just continue to do. And I also will say that there were Haitians on TPS who were bold and brave and courageous, who put their names forward so that a lawsuit can go forward. And that's how we're right now at the Supreme Court. And so the question is not what are y'all doing? The question should be for us, what are we doing? What are you doing to contribute to this great community? And every little thing matters, right? And when you're working, bring someone with you. That's how community works.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes people think of this work as requiring us to do these like really big, bold things. But really, when we're talking about how this all operates, I mean, one person shares a resource, another person corrects misinformation, somebody else brings a neighbor to a meeting or a budget hearing, somebody is helping an elder to avoid falling victim to a scam. And then there's somebody also making sure that there's a young person out there that knows that they belong in rooms of leadership. And so that is how we build capacity as a community.
So again, on behalf of NHAEON, the Haitian American Professionals Coalition, Avanse, Ansanm, I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. We'll continue sharing resources and next steps after tonight. If you registered, you will get information from us. This isn't the end of the conversation. It's part of a larger effort to keep our communities informed, engaged, and ready. It is an election year, midterms. Actually, there's always elections.
Yes.
So we're voting local, state, federal, school board, PTAs, tenant unions, you name it. We got to be ready and present.
Yes. And a huge thank you to Telepam and Telepam Studios, especially Bobby. Okay, Merci un pile. Thank you all so much for joining the National Haitian American Community Town Hall. It is a wrap. So bonsoir tout le monde. Thank you.
Recording.